Okay, so this demo is going to be continuing where we left off. So we've assembled the puppet, but we haven't necessarily, we've put him on pegs, so he's partially rigged, but we haven't actually set the pivot points or started animation yet. So we're going to be, at the very least, setting up the pegs, pivot points now, and then depending on how much time we have, we'll either start animating or we may push that to the next video. So we have our character, and he is extended all the way to the 60th frame. When his mouth is open, it is not colored. We've not done that yet. But that's the only part that right now changes at all. His eyes and maybe his eyebrows might have alternative parts too. But his eyes are definitely going to have alternative parts, and his mouth's going to have more alternative parts, especially the mouth because we have to lip sync. So before I do that, though, let's get working on the pegs and putting the anchor points or pivot points. You're going to hear me call them either because certain software calls it different things. I believe in Harmony it's called pivots. In After Effects they're called anchors. But it's basically the point of rotation. So right now if I were to take Cain, well, Cain's head, we did move that already. But if I were to take like his body is located over here, so that's definitely not a way he wants to bend. That also just reminded me that his bangs are missing. Command P to give it a parent, or a peg, parent peg, and we need that to be part of the head. That's the head over there, and boom. And where is the peg point? There it is. And I'm using the mouse wheel to scroll back and close and far, but you can also use 2 or 1 on the keyboard. Alright, so now let's start going into these. So some things to consider. We don't want to do any kind of puppeted type animation to the drawings. We want to do it to the pegs only. So that's something to consider. We can guarantee this a few different ways. We can go into transform, and I believe it's in here. Or yeah, peg selection mode. So that automatically selects the peg. I'm sure you can't really see it. If you're ever not sure what you've selected, so I selected this and I'm like, did I select the head or did I select the peg? If you hit the O key anywhere, so if I go to the timeline and I hit O, I can see what's selected, so I can tell that it is the head peg, head-P, because that's the one that's highlighted. The head itself, I don't believe is. Yeah, it's not. If I go up here into the node view and I hit O, it takes me right here. So let's say I do... I'm going to zoom in close here, and I'm going to select his arm, so something that's off screen. Well, let's grab the other arm. This one. Now if I go in here and I hit O, oops, nothing, but if I go in here and hit O, it will take me to it. So it works for the node view and for the timeline. But that's a way that you can tell. And with the with the transform tool, you can grab anything. And if you have this selected, it will grab a peg. However, we don't want to change the pivot point, although we can, with this tool, just because it only changes it temporarily. Sometimes you're going to want to change the pivot point specifically on certain frames, but not overall. So to change the pivot point permanently, we want to go up here to the advanced animation controls. If they are not available for you, you can go up here to the gray area. It doesn't have to be up here. It can also be down here. It's just I don't feel like there's enough room. So I can go up here and right mouse click and go to advanced animation. You can see it. Something else I recommend having up too is coordinate. And coordinate just lets you see how much, let's say if I rotate this at all, allows you to see it. See it very quickly. This will also tell you if things are closer or further, or up or down. Your positions, here's your scale, here's your rotations. These rotations are out because we're not working in 3D mode. That's why that's not a thing. Although as you can see, there is Z-axis still available even when you're not in 3D mode. How this behaves is slightly different, whether you're in 3D mode or not, but you can actually change your Z value. But we're not going to be doing that in here. So, let's see. We are on the chest. So I would recommend Now, you might be tempted to put it right here, and that's okay. I would maybe recommend bringing it lower to where the hips would be. And then the bending forward and back might be a little bit more intuitive. Now, you gotta be careful because I didn't really give myself enough arm to work with. But if the animation looks really good here, and the fact that the arm cuts off is distracting, then let's see, you can change the numbers up here, just like you would in Maya if you've ever used Maya. It's a little bit similar to having the channel box up. But if the animation looks good, but except for this problem, then we can always go back in and fix it. We can always adjust. If enough of the chest shows too, I'll need to adjust that also, because the way this sleeve goes over the chest is not great, but it's off screen, so it may not be an issue at all. So, chest is down at the hips now, or maybe a little higher, maybe like mid-back. He's sitting in this scene. Okay, that might be alright. Head. Head is here at the jawline. Good. Yeah, okay. I mean, he can turn his head that high. It does make the neck a little thin, but that's a really awkward, like, shaft head tilt, which looks great in shaft cartoons, not look great here. So I'm sure that's not going to be an issue. Let's grab his neck. And that is definitely not where we want the pivot to be. Nope, not there. That's not great. Let's put it maybe down here. Let's move it up a little higher. And actually, the head should be following the neck, because that's a little awkward. So, neck. So right now, head is following the chest. Should be following the neck. The neck should be in between. I could plug this out and then plug this in. I could also try holding down Option and moving them right here. Now I did disconnect it from the actual neck drawing, which is not great, so let's put that back. There we go. So now, there we go. That's a little bit more like a neck actually works. So I'll do that. Let's see here. Okay. I will need to be a little careful if he bends his head too far down. If he does, I can maybe adjust the back. I don't know if his head's even going to go that far, and if it does, I may need to animate the position of it also, so that I can, going forward and back. I have to be a little careful because I don't want to, break his neck. Okay. Eyes, I'm going to move them over, but his eyes probably aren't going to move. Pupils will, though. Pupil, right on the pupil. Brow. Brow L. Yeah. So right now, the brows are hidden behind the hair. If I wanted the brows to show up in front of the hair, but not the color to, so that's a stylistic choice that I like. I'm just going to show you if I just move it. You could do that, and a lot of anime does do that. I don't love that look because it makes it look like the eyebrows are floating in front of the brows, and it's more that I want it to look like you could see the brows through the hair. So, optionally, and this is just a stylistic choice that I like to do, not something that you have to do with yours, I can make the brows, although the brows would have to be on there. I would need the brow color to be on a separate layer than the inks, or this won't work. There we go, brow lines. And I want that to be in front of the bangs. Okay. How does that look? There we go, now it shows through. We gotta do that with this one as well. X. Command V for paste. Liner. So that did cause a problem before, when having the brow connected both into the line art and connected straight up. I don't think it would be an issue this time. It was just because the lines were being used twice, and we didn't want it to. So I could do a color arts layer and then just plug brow into that and then plug it in. I don't know that that's necessary though. I think it might be alright as it is. If we start having any trouble with the brows doing stuff we don't want it to do, then we'll revisit. So, then we move on. So, brow, and that's not going to change the parenting, because the parenting is to the drawing and the line art is parented to this, so that's not going to cause any problems with the puppet. So, now, with the pupil, it didn't really matter where I placed it as long as it was somewhere in here. Here, it'll matter if you think you're going to be rotating it. I don't know if I'm going to rotate it much. I would probably more likely frame by frame some of the brow poses, but you also got to think about how much time you have. I probably wouldn't put it at the end. Maybe in the middle, or maybe a little bit closer to the front here. So we have this thing. Here. I would also need to move the position. Just rotating is not going to work great. And I'm just going to go through and see if I'm missing anything. I think I'm missing the arms. And that is the puppet right, yes. And where's that? There's the pivot. Change to the advanced animation controls. I may... okay. Might be okay. If it doesn't look great in animation, I may have to separate the sleeves from the arms. I don't know if the arms are going to move enough for it to make a big difference, but... Like, I want these to react, I don't want them to overreact. Yeah, and I may end up separating the sleeves. But let's just leave it for now. For the sake of time, and then if we find out that the sleeves really need to be changed, I'll separate them. Okay, let's go through and grab each item. So there we go. There we go. Head, chest, neck, bangs. Again, I don't think I'm going to really move the bangs. And if I did move them a lot, I have to be really careful, because if I move them too much, you can see it looks real fake. The toupee. So if I move them right now, because it's one big piece, I'd have to be very careful. If I wanted to move this a lot, I would need to probably section the hair out, or add distortions or anything. So now, we're ready to move. So, with a dialogue, this is a dialogue piece.
Am I that obvious an outsider?
So with a dialogue piece, it is more often recommended that you animate the body first. Body first, head first, do all the body and head accents and arm accents and everything else, the performance, before doing anything with the mouth. Especially if you're doing frame-by-frame animation where the character's head could look in different positions, different angles. This is a puppet, and he is probably just going to have his head roughly in the same angle the whole time. I don't anticipate right now that he's going to be moving. I don't anticipate switching his head with any other angle. So he's probably just going to have the same head angle. Thus, it's not as serious, but if we wanted to, we could do the body first. Because if he does angle his head down, then I may want to adjust the mouth shape to imply that we're looking at him from a little bit more of a down view. We can't go too crazy, because this puppet can only move so much. But, so I'm going to go through and do it the movement, moving the body way.
Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider?
That obvious an outsider. So he doesn't have a lot of time to move around too much, and he's meant to be tired, so I don't want him to have lots of change. So something we could do is maybe a head accents. Head accents are really important. Really, if you couldn't get away with anything else, if you had only enough time to move one thing, it should really be his head. So we could do a, am I that obvious? We could have his head lower. So, he's not moving yet.
Am I that
Am I that obvious an outsider?
Am I that
I could try moving his head down. Am I? Have his head end a little early. Come down. Am I that? His head's already down. Start to move it up at obvious and settle at outsider. So maybe not have him start to move yet. Let's turn on the running guy and make current frame. And let's insert key to start with. Let's have his head come down. Like that. Obvious. I don't want to do too much. Negative 7.15, that's not bad. Now, he's going to move super mechanically right now. I'm not going to worry about him looking like a robot just yet, because he will. That's something I would deal with in the graph. Sometimes I'll go in and add extra keys so I can get a rough idea of what timing I generally want to do. Maybe slightly more. Erase that one. Now, as I move, I want to make sure running guy is on. Animate current frame. I'm using this, and I'm seeing keyframes being made. What it's actually making is, well, it's making keys for all of them. But I think if I, yeah, it's keying all of them because I'm using transform. If I was using this one instead, it would only key that one. For better or for worse. That may be something you want, it may not be. I often will grab these, but this isn't really bad either, because you could do it, you could kind of work on all of it. Let's have him stay there. Insert key. I want to move up. Obvious. Maybe ease a little bit. So that'll probably be refined in the graph. Might even remove this key. But you go up 0. Back to normal. Up, not up, down. And let's move him low. Here we go. Insert key or FNF6.
Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that?
Maybe a little more in there. For anticipation. If that's the case, we want to move this a little sooner.
Am I that on?
Maybe more so.
Am I that obvious an outsider?
Okay. I don't know if I love it yet. Let's go into the rotation. We can double click on it. So the reason why it looks so robotic is because this is linear interpolation, which just means it goes boom to boom to boom to boom with no easing. So we're going to want to adjust that. So straight lines, it's just a sudden change from one to the other. Pulling out the handle will give it an ease. So here is the same, right, so this is like a stepped key, so it's the same info, you just stay still. What about if I get rid of that one and pull this one out a lot so that he stays down for a while, but he's still moving the whole time. Let's move this one over.
Am I that obvious enough?
Too much. So he's got too much going on. Let's see. Let's get rid of you.
Am I that obvious?
Let's get rid of the anticipation. He's moving, doesn't have a lot of time to move, so that might not be helping here. Let's go to you. So he's got to slow out. Raise his head during that. So let's get rid of these. Key. I deleted the rotation key, but they still have the scale and everything else. But they're all zeros. There's no change. Let's go to that one. Let's pull this one out.
Am I that obvious enough? Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that?
He's kind of rocking his head around too much. I think he's going to need to pause a little more. Let's have him hold off on bowing his head until he starts talking. Let's give it not as much of an ease. So when he's like, am I? His head's dropping.
Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that? Am I that? Am I that obvious an outsider? If not, am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious?
I think it's the beginning. It's not working. What if we didn't have him move as much?
Am I that obvious an outsider?
That gives it a little anticipation. Then it goes up.
Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that?
Maybe starts moving right from the beginning. Yeah, guess what? Bring this down. Maybe have him have his head low. And then I'll do this next time. Oh, whoops. That's if you want to render it out and then play it, but I don't want to do that. There's nothing special about rendering and playing this.
Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider?
Okay, so maybe adding a little bit of position change might help this as well. Although, see how much that will work with the head, because that would probably affect the neck. Slightly. Let's change position. Keys.
outsider. Am I that obvious an outsider?
Oh no, that's not pleasant. Let's keep this down. And let's just go with the value for now.
Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider?
Okay. Not that one. Okay.
Am I that obvious an outsider? Am I that obvious an outsider?
Okay, so that is, right now I'm just starting with the head movement and the basic rig of the body, or the parent setup and pivots of the body. Next we're going to continue animating the body, little bits and pieces of it, and then we'll go into the eyes and the mouth and start doing frame by frame as much as necessary.